I think we're all familiar. I mean, going back to maybe the inconvenient truth with Al Gore, but essentially for 40 years, environmental policy has been focused on CO2 emission reduction. And the three big examples that people are most familiar with are wind, solar, and electric vehicles. All three of those, the objective was to reduce CO2 emissions compared to the alternatives, which would be coal-fired power plants, natural gas, case of vehicles, gas or diesel. It's been unfortunately until very recently that people really appreciated the very harmful impact of methane. And to give you a perspective, when CO2 is emitted into the atmosphere, it has a negative effect on greenhouse gas warming for hundreds of years. And by contrast, when methane is emitted, it breaks down in less than 20 years. And during that time frame, the impact of methane is 85 times worse than CO2. But it wasn't until 2021 that the UN IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, made the following statement: if the world doesn't reduce methane emissions by half in the next 10 years, we will not be able to slow the rate of global warming to stay below 1.5 degrees C perceived tipping point. And the thing that's very sobering about that is we've had 40 years of policy directed towards CO2 emission reduction, and we've had essentially less than 3 where the world's climate experts have recognized that methane is actually the most important priority because the effect is so harmful and it's so short-lived. So LoCI really anticipated that methane emission reduction was going to become important. It's just now becoming recognized by governments and carbon policy experts. And to give you another example, and then I'll stop. When the UN IPCC at COP24 made this statement about methane, this was in May of 2021. By November of 2021, the US with the European Union created a global methane pledge. There have now been 130 countries have signed the global methane pledge, committing countries to reduce methane emissions by half over 10 years in line with the UN IPCC recommendations. Prior to that, there was 0 countries that were focused on methane emission reduction. So very recent, critically important, and now there is relatively little policy to incentivize this behavior. So I think we're going to see that change, and there's a lot more public attention on methane emission reduction, and I think the government policy and regulations are going to be following.